All right, I think we're ready to go.
Katie.
All right, I would be happy to share some of this work that was sent. Oh, you're gonna have to let me screen share as well. It says it's blocked.
Oh, here we go. Who else can share? All panelists.
There we go. Okay.
There we go. Okay.
So hopefully you can see my screen.
We can.
All right, great. So the documents that I have prepared for this meeting are this document right here, which is a culmination of department requests for 2020 FY23 to FY27, which is what we traditionally do. What you're looking at right now is the previous plan. So you'll see everything that was requested last year, and you'll remember from this time last year, we had pretty limited resources, and we're being very conservative during the first year of the COVID pandemic. So our capital plan was only 138,000, which is a lot less than our 6% target. The 6% target is we'd like to spend approximately 6% of our operating budget by financial policy, and that includes approximately $280,000 in previous expenditures through debt. So the debt that's in the operating budget for big projects. So this is the old plan. So this is, that tab went through when I clicked it.
Yes, we can see it. Yep.
Okay. So in blue, dark blue here, you'll see, again, the FY22, the last year's plan, and I won't scroll, I'll go a little bit slower. So I know mostly you're interested in any changes, updates, or what we're looking at for FY23, and then I'll talk about what departments are requesting for FY24, 5, 6, and 7. So last year, starting off with this first yellow block here, the excavator was discussed and debated, and although this board thought it was needed, it was prioritized for FY23 given the limited funding. Travis did get an updated quote for this wheeled mini excavator, which I will send to you, and I have for you the exact quote. But that increased a little more than $20,000 to a $65,000 request. That original quote was from 2019, and you're going to see a lot of inflation in some of these requests, which is not uncommon, but it is higher than normal. So moving down, FY23 still has an additional $100,000 request for road repair. This would expand the annual repair of town roads. We have 88 miles of roads in town, and the Chapter 90 money we get, about 350,000 of it, can repair anywhere from 2 to 4 miles. So in order to catch up, this was a Board of Selectmen idea to add additional money in road repair in years where it's possible. Since they decided to request that, we've never been able to fund it. Next, there's a request to repair the garage roof. In the DPW garage roof is definitely well overdue for repair and leaking. This is an estimate at $100,000 for repairing the tin roof on the DPW garage. Very small $500 request from Cemetery for a backpack blower. This was an initiative last year just to get them involved in the capital process. So although it's well below the threshold, just showing some support for the Cemetery Commission here, who had not previously been involved in capital purchases. Moving down, the fire department has requested a couple additional radios. So this is an increase from radios that were put off last year. Originally it was, let me look and get it exact for you. $10,000 request. It's been up to $17,500 to replace all of their radios. I did look and had the accountant look if the Holden Hospital account could be used for this. It would be a stretch and probably not advisable. Holden Hospital needs to be specific for ambulance and medical. However, there are some firefighter old grant monies that we're looking at for possibly using this. I did ask Chief to use any and all possible grant monies before requesting additional money, but that is the request from the Chief. And the library has two requests here.
Hey, Ryan, before you go any further, can you explain the prior years, which was $10,000, was that also for full replacement of all the radios or only partial?
It was about 2/3 of the radios. So I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but I will send you documentation from the Chief. I believe it adds 3 radios to the request.
Okay, so this is for the full the full grouping of all of the radios, right? This time around. Yeah. Okay.
Them all. And I'm asking you guys to remember a lot of fine details, but we did think that dispatch might pay for some of the radios. That capital request has been discussed and talked about for 3-4 years, and it's my opinion that that's not going to happen. Given that the state funds from dispatch have gone to offset some of the extraordinary cost increases in the dispatch side, capital budgeting is definitely a secondary priority. So leaning on that money we'd be waiting a while. So then 2 requests from the library. One is to replace the flooring in the basement. This is primarily the wood floor that's found throughout. There is some damage that needs to be repaired, and it's just addressing piece by piece some of the capital needs in the library. Next, the library foundation. I worked with Tom, who represents the library trustees in the past, to assess the foundation. There was a report done that showed there is some damage that needs to be repaired. It's not as bad as we thought, which is great. There is some monies currently for repairing the foundation, but not enough. So $20,000 would be, I believe, more than enough to cover the repair. And then moving down to the police department, 2 items. There was no change from in those library requests. As you can see, they're not colored. So anything in yellow is a change in the actual request. Anything in green is new, just for color sake here. So for the police cruiser, 2 reasons why this increased from $55,000 and moved up a year. So Chief believes that we need to replace one of the cruisers now instead of next year. So he's asked that we move an FY24 request to FY23, mostly due to high mileage and repair costs. And then also because of some of the older radios, etc., and inflation, this cost request has been estimated at $71,000 instead of $55,000. So this would be for the radios that are needed for it and to cover some of the increases in costs. Then you'll see another yellow over here. That's same cost estimate in the cyclical every other year replacement with a little bit of inflation dollars added. Next, the police department is looking to replace the air conditioner that went this summer. We continue to see some failures at the Slade building. We did replace we did emergency repair of the Council on Aging air conditioning a couple of years ago now. And we knew this one was coming with the police department, but it definitely failed well before we thought it would. And it does need to be replaced in order for there to be air conditioning in the police department. And then no change to the parks request. They're looking for $8,000 to repair the surface of the basketball court at Curtis Field. This is, again, part of their investment in making that recreational fields and recreational area sustainable and usable. They obviously made a big investment last year. The town did with repairing the playground, and then you'll see in coming years you have the skate park and the walking track. This might be a target for CPA funds, but that'll come later in the budget process when CPA looks at that. So that's next year. I'll just walk you through some of the changes in FY24 to FY27. The estimate for the dump truck with plow and the brush mower are estimates I have that I can send to you. Those are not getting cheaper as time goes on, and you'll see they increase because of inflation. The DPW here added a trencher for FY27, estimating the cost of that being about $10,000. That is 5 years away, but they wanted to get it on the plan. Additional road repair, just adding that in for FY27. Two reds here, remove the ambulance and fire truck. I'll get to that in the next tab, but those are going to be multi-year borrows. Last year, this committee recommended to the Board of Selectmen that these be funded through multi-year borrows that could be absorbed into the operating budget once the current debt is resolved, and that will come off the books in FY23, which I can show you in a chart. I'm sorry, FY24, the last year is FY23. We already talked about the cyclical police cruiser, and then that's it. So a lot of changes to FY23, which is not unexpected. When they become real, we add a little bit to it, or they become next. And then some dollar amount changes as Travis and other department heads looked into updating the costs to make sure that they are real. So we're planning ahead for these large purchases. So, Mr. Chair, I said a lot there. We can stop here, or I can go into the multi-year or long-term borrowing and any other things, or we can stop here and talk about this.
Anybody have any questions on the update to the yearly plan? No, I was just kind of happy to see that the foundation repair. I think we were thinking like a 6-figure repair, but that's not so bad.
Yeah, no, not as bad as we thought, and hopefully it's even less than that. It looks like it's going to be a patch and preventative rather than a full repair. It should be very good.
All right, why don't we just move on to your next tab?
Okay, so this part of the plan addresses either really large expenditures that are funded from outside sources, outside of our tax levy and internal funding, or multi-year borrows, which would heavily inflate the cost totals for the capital plan. So changes to this long-term plan. Added a $600,000, or really changed a $600,000 request to repair Lombard Road. This isn't a new request. Michael, I'm sure you recognize this from many discussions when you were on the Board of Selectmen a couple of years ago now. Lombard Road is something that needs to be addressed. However, multiple attempts to secure strap grants or outside funding have failed. In talking to our town engineers, it's not likely that this project would ever, under the current administration or current funding sources, be paid for through a strap grant. So got to find another way to fund it, and I do have some recommendations later in this presentation. So 2 additions, but they really got pulled off the plan I just showed you and put here, are the ambulance and the fire truck. So how to address these large purchases and borrows, recommending, as this committee did last year, multi-year borrows for these, which would look like borrowing the total amount, purchasing, and then paying for it over a set period of time. And I do have a document that will show you how that would fit into the current town finances. Both can fit in if proper planning is done. And then the other consideration here is High Street. So currently working on, was working on it quite a bit before I got deployed, unfortunately. It's one of the projects that's been put off a little bit as I do my business here. But we do have a study that's looking at High Street and the intersection of High Street and 68 to see how we might be able to repair that road. since it's a public safety road and such an important thoroughfare in the town, we do think that it would be competitive for a STRAP grant. So looking to pivot from things like Lombard Road, a project like Lombard Road to High Street. So that's been added here. So then here's the next tab, and this is what you're gonna, here's what you guys definitely want to see. So how would this all work? How does it work within the current finance landscape and our financial policies? So these are just up here, you're going to see the projected operating budget. This is what we believe the operating budget might be. The budget's being constructed right now, so this is purely an estimate. It's about 3% increase on the total budget from last year, which is more than we normally increase, so it's a conservative number. The target is based off the capital plan that UMass built a few years ago, how much we should as a town be spending by policy on maintaining our capital. And the target that we came up with, all the boards together and through our financial policies was 6%. So we'd look to be spending about $600,000 on capital if everything went to plan, which it almost never does, but it is good to know the target. So in FY23, we are projecting about $280,000 in operating debt. This is a level funding of debt, keeping the debt number the same. We talked a lot last year about why that's good to keep the debt number the same. Although it does take up some of the operating budget, it does allow us to do long-term projects and fun things like ambulances and fire trucks, even when debt goes down. So that would leave $427,000 of spending that we would like to do in order to hit that 6% target. So these are just aspirational goals. I'm sorry, this 427,000 is what's being requested. So it's $100,000 above our aspirational goal, which is a rare figure for Hubbardston, but what is being requested this year. Interesting, this year we could quote unquote afford it because of the level of free cash we have. So even after putting $200,000 into savings and then paying for some things, special town meeting with free cash, we still have a certified free cash total of $585,000. That number comes from David, the interim town administrator, and the accountant for what's left in our free cash. Two interesting pools of money are also available for this discussion. One is ARPA money. You'll hear about this a lot. This is money that comes from essentially the financial response at the federal level to COVID. By what happened was the federal government gave the state government some money. The state has an excess and they've decided to give X amount to each town. So the total for Hubbardston is twice these two figures together, or about 1.4 million. The lost revenue calculation is, and I can get as detailed as you want with this, but what we call in the military, the bottom line up front is we are allowed to calculate the revenue we lost because of COVID, how much money we should have taken in, but we didn't. That total calculation is $539,896. That is a number that was certified by our accountant. And we can spend that quote unquote on anything. Since it was revenue that we were supposed to have and we don't, we now have that money to spend, which is a once in a generation opportunity for this town. And something that should be discussed and weighed in with this long-term planning. And then the other half of the ARPA money, this $181,000, is available now to the town for anything that meets the qualifications of ARPA. So again, to simplify, things that might qualify are anything that is related to public health, COVID, premium pay for emergencies, for emergency workers, anything that falls under the COVID umbrella. So the differences between these two funds is the 539 can be spent on anything, and the 181 needs to be hyper targeted on these COVID-related expenses. And very few things qualify, especially in our capital planning. I will mention one thing that I do think qualifies, and it would also qualify for the other almost 700,000, which would be renovations to the Slade building and possibly the public safety buildings to make them more COVID friendly for the public or our employees. And we are looking into that because we know those two big projects have been talked about for a while. So then moving down, we do not use free cash in the operating budget right now, which is a big win.
Sorry to interrupt here. I apologize. Is there a time restriction for the use of the ARPA restricted?
I don't, I'm not going to say because I don't know exactly and I don't want to give you bad information, but it is several years.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, so proposed free cash use. We did not use free cash in the operating budget last year for the first time in many years, which is a big financial win for the town, and we do not expect to use it again this year. So normally we would use some free cash for operating budget. Right now that is at zero. We'd like to keep $100,000 in reserve because we use free cash for capital and other unforeseen expenses. So earmark $100,000 if possible to not use it at all. The proposed plan that I discussed in the last tab or 2 tabs ago for you is $427,000. So the total free cash uses proposed in this hypothetical financial situation would be $527,000, which would leave a surplus of $58,266 to be used for reserves or to fund another project, like a long-term project. So overall, we are in good shape in terms of free cash. We should be wary with the use of free cash because it is this one-time thing. We do have this additional ability to pay for things using the ARPA funds, which is again a one-time thing. One restriction on it is it does have to go through the ARPA board, which is being stood up and led by one of our selectmen, Heather Monroe. That board will decide ultimately how to use these funds, but a recommendation from this board and obviously the Board of Selectmen is going to go a long way. So something to be discussed. So that is the financial situation, much different than last year. I would caution that everybody wants to use the free cash because it's available. I don't blame them trying to solve some of the longer problems, but a thoughtful approach to how to use this funds would be really important because it would help address how funds are used in the years to come. So cautious optimism. Again, I can stop here and discuss or move on to some long-term planning thoughts that I sent to you to help kind of put all of these decisions into context.
I have a question about the marijuana funds. I know we were talking about maybe using some of the money that we're going to get from them as not recurring revenue, but just one-time uses. What's the status of that? Do you know?
I do. So David and I were talking about that a lot this fall and this early winter. So far, we have not received any funds yet from it, but that's not a negative thing. They just haven't produced any funds yet. But we are guaranteed a certain dollar amount each year, and as long as the operations are up and running, which one of them is, we do get that funding. We do not have the funds yet, so I wouldn't recommend spending them. One thing you do want to make sure you're spending it on is things that are marijuana impact related, right? So those would be police, fire, any increases in services, roads, etc. That money will be, in theory, available for the next 5 years. We just don't know the dollar amount yet. So David and I were discussing making a recommendation to you and to the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee that we wait to see the receivables for 1 year plan and then incorporate it as free cash and then into long-term decisions for FY24.
All right, fair enough. Anyone else have anything, or we'll have Ryan move on otherwise?
Well, Ryan, just a quick thing that one of the pot growers keeps threatening that he's going to reduce his amount of money that he's going to pay the town because the planning board have asked him to do all sorts of things which he considers unreasonable, and the planning board has simply just ignored him or referred him back to the Board of Selectmen. And I don't think he's been back to the Board of Selectmen to attempt to renegotiate his community host agreement for anything like that. Just keep that in mind.
Yeah, yes, and he's as a business proprietor in town, welcome to come to the select board and discuss it anytime. He did sign a host community agreement with the community, so we believe that he will honor that agreement. And there are discussions across the state with all the different growers that have host community agreements with towns about what or what does not qualify and how to implement these things. I'm not surprised at all, as this is new and sounds good on paper, but when they start doing it, things change and evolve. So
yep,
happy to have him come if you would like to.
Hey, Ryan, can I quickly go back to your draft plan, and just wanted to explore a little bit more the police department, the cruiser that you had on line 26. I recall you mentioning that the line item on the prior year, I think it was like, what was it, 50,000?
55.
55,000. This year it's 71,000. Do we know what the breakdown is for the radio equipment versus the incremental on the police cruiser?
Yes, let me pull it up here. Are you looking at a Word document here?
Am I looking at the Word document? No, I'm looking at your at the draft plan.
All right. We'll show you what I'm looking at. So we're talking about the same thing.
Okay.
Okay, so this comes from the chief here, and
okay. I see it now.
This is the narrative.
Yeah.
I'll send you all the docs again that I've compiled for the backup for all of this planning.
Okay. So you're saying that this was submitted as part of the package that we are in receipt of in our inbox, right?
You will be in receipt of this backup documentation. I'll just
all right, that's fine. I'll take a look through that.
And it talks about adding the radios and that's necessary.
So the radios represent between $5,000 and $6,000 out of the 75, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the incremental is from 55 to anywhere between 65 and 69,000, or 68. Yes. And, yeah. Okay. It's a big jump.
It is.
All right, I'll take a look at that once I receive it. Thank you.
All right. Chairman, where would you like me to go next?
You were going to talk about some long-term considerations, right?
Yes. I can. Let's do that.
Yep.
All right. So I just want to say before we start that this is all just for the purposes of putting things in context. None of this is planned or going to happen. It's a dangerous thing to just throw numbers out there, but I think it's really important that the Board of Selectmen asked me to simplify and to put things into perspective for them. So this is a working document for that. And obviously the CIPC is making a lot of recommendations about this stuff. So I just want all the caveats that go with this is all hypothetical. So what you're looking at here with these white, green, and red numbers is white represents current borrowing in the operating budget. So you'll see a roads project that Michael, you were involved with when you were on the board that we're still paying for, and a dump truck, an old DPW dump truck purchase. So we pay for these every year. And as we talked about last year, these numbers are coming off the books next year. So these will be in the current year operating budget. And then we are debt-free for, well, relatively debt-free for the years to come. So that's a lot of buying power. That is $190,000 worth of borrowing power, which get the town anywhere from, up to $2 million of borrowing. Also, we have $400,000 left in trucks that were purchased in 2018. That is two trucks that were purchased. So this is proposing that we would pay $50,000 a year plus interest to pay those off. Another idea might be to pay that note off in general to allow for more borrowing power, which would give up. This is why we have $280,000. It's these three borrows right here. So then down here you have some of the things that we discussed last year on the CIPC and have been kicking around for a while. So this is assuming that the town and the Board of Selectmen takes your recommendation last year to fund a public safety building through an operational override. So that would be in addition to our current budget or above the levy, meaning taxes would increase to pay for the public safety building. I should say that every year we wait for that public safety building ask, the costs are going up, and no bigger jump than the last year or two when construction costs have gone crazy. And I'm sure anyone who works in construction or around it can tell you the same.
Just 1 second. This question is probably more for Katie. And Ryan, you certainly may be in the know. Has there been any discussions on the select board level regarding the Yons Garage? I mean, we all were pretty impressed when we went through last spring, and then we said we would table it until now. Has there been any discussion at all on your level?
No, we kind of talked about at the last meeting, questioning on when you guys were going to have a meeting so we could start the conversation back up about what's going on with buildings. Is there some kind of idea, and start getting our heads back together. No one has really put a foot forward with any idea. Yeah, everything kind of just stopped with COVID, and that was like the end of it. No one has moved forward with the building stuff at all. We kind of, no, there hasn't been any.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, as we all said last year, I think our best shot at getting a new public safety building is probably renovating that garage. It'd be a much better ask for $2.5 million, $3 million than, $13-14 million. So we should make some time, maybe after the first of the year, Katie, to have the two boards come together, maybe at one of your meetings, and kind of go over this.
Yeah, I think we kind of gotta push it, because I feel like no one really wants to go ahead with anything without hearing a plan, but no one really knows a plan or knows what to come up with a plan. It's kind of like everyone's like, well, what do you want to do? Well, what do you want to do? Well, what do you want to do? So if we kind of all get together, maybe we can push this a little forward in some direction.
Fair enough. All right. Sorry, Ryan, go ahead.
No, this is, so this is a plan, but it is a culmination of everybody's thoughts on what are the big things the town needs to address in the future, right? So the public safety building you just talked about is step one. That is no surprise and was discussed at length last year. And I agree that until a decision is made there, everything else is kind of waiting. So the four big things that potentially need funding that are bigger than pay as you go, which is this annual request for money for department things like cruisers and fixing buildings, would be a renovation to the Slade building. So this would be a renovation to the current existing structure to consolidate all town offices in one spot and also expand space for the senior center. The number is just based off of conversations that I've had with engineers, but it's not a real number. It's just a placeholder to start the discussion. So let's put that at $2 million. The fire truck, which we discussed on the capital plan, the ambulance, which we discussed on the capital plan, and then Lombard Road. So what this document does is assuming conservative estimates. So I have it down here. No, I don't have it down here, but I assumed about 2 to 3% interest, which is way more than municipal borrowers are right now. We're borrowing at about 0.5% right now, which is pretty good. But let's say 2% conservative, just because numbers should be conservative when you're talking about long-term planning. The annual cost for borrowing $2 million for the Slade building would be approximately $135,000 a year to pay off over, say, 20 years. The fire truck would be about 70 to pay off over, let's see, how many did I put on here? 10 years. And then the ambulance about 41,000 to pay off over 10 years, which is about the lifespan of those pieces of equipment. And that could increase if you want to borrow for less years, or decrease if you put some money down, quote unquote. So these costs, Lombard Road, which isn't on here because I zeroed it out, would be approximately the same as the fire truck, so about $70,000 a year. So the town could not afford to do all of these at once, but because there is expiring debt, you could address a couple of these if you plan them out correctly. So for instance, if Lombard Road was to come off the table, then the Slade building, the fire truck, and the ambulance could be borrowed for at approximately the level we're borrowing for now, plus inflation. And that's what these numbers reflect up here. So this is based off current levels of borrowing, where we would be at with all of these projects. Interestingly, if the ARPA money was used for some of these, so let's say the town decided to pay for the repair of Lombard Road using the lost revenue in ARPA, then that would take that large project off the table and would leave these three larger projects to address. There's also the idea that we would use money in next year's operating budget. So since we do not have 200,000 or these combined, about $180,000 in spending, we could pay off the debt for the next 2 years before the Slade building borrow came off for the old debt, which would take $50,000 in borrowing off and would allow 2 or 3 of these projects to fit together in the current level of the operating budget. So with some planning and some decisions on what the town wants to address, there are ways to fund it. The one caution here is if you use all of the borrowing power within the operating budget, then you wouldn't be able to borrow for anything else. You'd be locking up the operating budget for the next 10 years, which was done when the decision was made to do the road project and to fund some of these trucks with borrowing. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it does commit the town. If you don't borrow, then there'll be a tremendous amount of pressure to use that operating budget for other things, like increasing staffing or increasing school costs, which are also things that are worthy of increasing costs for, but need to be weighed against other needs of the town. So this sheet is just, or this document is a way for the CIPC to play with some of these long-term decisions or to visualize what's coming. If no decision was made, then it would be my recommendation in FY24 to use the expiring debt to pay for either capital cash, right, or additional road maintenance, or pay off old debt. And you guys know me well enough to know right now that I'm going to pay off old debt in my recommendations until a decision is made, because that puts us in the best financial position and gives us the most amount of flexibility to address the problems. But because, like you, I care about the future of this town. We have the resources right now, and we have the opportunity between the ARPA money, this free cash allotment that we have, and the expiring debt to solve some of these problems that have been talked about and that have been highlighted in planning and master plan for a long time. And if careful decisions are made, this should set up the town for the next 10 to 20 years. If you talk public safety and Slade building renovation, for the next 30, 40 years, going back to caring more about when to replace trucks and not necessarily large buildings, etc. So it's exciting. It's also daunting, but definitely worthy of further discussion. So there you go. No small decisions or discussion points. Go.
What would be your recommendation for? I mean, it seems like we should use the ARPA money you know, we have, like you said, we have a chance to use that to do some good stuff. Would your recommendation from your end be to pay off old debt and start taking on new with that, or would you use a lump sum like that to just get Lombard Road finished? You know, like a big project like that all at once.
So given the, you're not going to like this answer, given the road money we get every year, that's about the $350,000 off the $200 million state funding for roads. Lombard Road would take 2 years to fix. So it's unlikely that you would take 2 years to fix one road, because you wouldn't be able to do anything else with it. You wouldn't be able to maintain roads or anything like that. So that's the Lombard Road problem, is that you'd only be addressing that one spot in town for 2 years. It's worth doing that, but it's going to handcuff your maintenance plan long term. So the only way you're going to fund it is through a large grant or a surprise amount of money, additional free cash, or something like ARPA, right? So it really does represent sort of this one-time chance to just take that problem off the board, at least for 20 years or so. So if you want to fix the problem, that's my recommendation. Always putting yourself in a better financial position is what I'm going to advocate for. So paying off the debt would do that, but it doesn't solve a problem. So it's kind of a 50-50. You want to solve problems. That's the reason for getting yourself in a good financial situation. So if you just keep trying to get yourself in a good financial situation, you're never going to get anything done. That's why I told you wouldn't like that answer. So I'm putting it back on you as to what you would want to do.
Yeah, no, that's actually the way I was thinking too, Brian, was to get a big project, because the likelihood of getting that kind of money in the future to do a road like that is slim. So, you know, at least with the slate building, fire truck and everything, we have the debt capacity in the next couple of years to absorb those. So no, you're right. I think moving to replace the road would be great.
And the interesting thing, and I would want to research this more. David and I talk about it a lot in our meetings, but I'm not in the chair like he is, or making these day-to-day decisions like the Board of Selectmen. But the remaining ARPA money, which is about, if you take 6 away from 1.4, is about $800,000. If you use it right and you build the Slade building project and the public safety building so that you can face future pandemics like COVID in a more equitable way, then those funds should be available to offset some of those costs, right? Like we should set up the town hall so that we're less vulnerable to COVID. And I don't see why you couldn't use the ARPA funds for that. There's other things to use it for sure. Broadband investment, water, sewer, investigating some of those things are eligible as well. But you could, I think, fund the studies, at least, of these renovations using the ARPA funds to try and make them as COVID friendly as possible so that the town can be more resilient. I don't know 100% that that's possible, but if you were able to use money that way, then we could reduce these costs, these bigger costs, so that we're asking the town for less money for things like public safety building, or reducing the borrow for, say, the Slade building renovation.
Okay.
And then lastly, you did talk about marijuana money. So that is an unproven source of revenue that exists out there to help fund some of this. And then the infrastructure bill that the federal government passed is also going to have an impact down to Hubbardston. We just don't know what that's going to be yet. So what this plan allows you to do is to bucket the money so that when it comes in, or if it comes in, you know what to do with it rather than trying to figure it out. So hoping that these decisions will help funnel the money towards these projects and start fixing them and building that public trust that the money is being invested the right way. But you got a lot of money coming, which is a rare problem. You just need to know how to spend it.
Got a quick question. In regards to the Lombard Road, you're, I think you were indicating that this is $1 million project. Is that correct?
Conservatively, 600,000.
600,000. Okay. So this would not quite cover it, right?
It would not, but with the free cash, so we'll go back to the other. You guys are remembering how I think now. So with this free cash overage plus the ARPA funds, you could easily pay for without changing your $100,000 cushion or your $427,000 in asks. So the project fits. It's a lot of money to spend on. If you're spending it there, you're not spending it somewhere else. So it's worth spending it on, but so are a lot of the other things. You could buy the ambulance outright, for example.
But this has been a sore point in the town for quite a long time, and it looks like we don't have avenues for funding it otherwise.
Yes, it is not in any plan right now, which you know me well enough to know that I hate that. It's not in any
I'm expressing an opinion here, and I think I'm giving it to the rest of the CIPC people, that they understand the way I'm starting to think. I'm looking at this here as a very good source, and I think that if we can make this happen and we can make this go away over the next 20 years, I think that's a very valuable exercise for us to consider doing and presenting this here.
Ryan, where did Dogwood Road come from? I mean, Lombard versus like Dogwood. Dogwood's been a kind of perennial source of strife with the residents there. There's a bunch of residents. I forgot, there was like 100 and some houses there, 100 houses, and the road's in pretty bad shape. So how was a decision made for Lombard versus the Dogwoods and Geordie Lane up there?
So Lombard Road is unique in that because we were targeting it with, we had an engineer for free, which was really nice of them, design grants to try and pay for Lombard Road using the STRAP grant for the small town road repair grants. We really thought that we were going to be successful with that, and we weren't. So it was never put into the plan. It would be the #1 priority, but like we talked about before, it eats up so much of the Chapter 90 money, 2 years worth, that you would have to stop the maintenance plan and do this for 2 years and then restart it. So someone like Dogwood and Geordie, which are certainly good targets for repair, would have to wait a couple of years while we were doing Lombard Road. And from being a selectman that that wouldn't make people happy. So
right. Now, is it like Dogwood and Geordie, are they significantly cheaper than Lombard?
It's the same per mile cost. It's just they're smaller roads.
Okay.
But they're not even there's a lot of roads in town that need to be fixed. It's not just Dogwood and Geordie. Brigham and Elm Street come to mind. Just thinking of the plan, I think we did Williamsville Road this year. And I'm calling things off the top of my head, which I hate doing, but there are roads in town that also need to be fixed, and we just don't have no town in New England does have the resources to fix them all. But.
Sure. No, I like the avenue of fixing Lombard. I think that's a good use of the money. It's a through road. It cuts through. A lot of people use it. A bunch of homes on there. It's in terrible shape. So certainly that sounds like a good plan. Anybody have any other thoughts? No. All right. All right. Anything else, Ryan?
So that's the full picture. We usually do a couple of these meetings. I hammer you with all this information and make you dizzy, and then come back and talk about it again, maybe before we put the plan together. One thing to note is the 427 is significantly more than we normally do. So this is an aggressive 1-year plan. If you were to approve it, I think you'd be hard pressed to find anything that doesn't deserve funding, but if you didn't fund things that, or put things off, or put things into different years or buckets, that means you can accomplish some of these other things. But again, you're just putting it off. Like last year, putting off the excavator or some of the radios, right? Things don't get cheaper. So
do we have an estimate on how long this the foundation work at the library might take? In terms of getting that the repairs done, repairing the library foundation. I know it's a small, I mean, it's a small number, but usually, I mean, I always look at foundation work as something that may take a long time. That's why I was kind of wondering.
So I would say of everything presented tonight, I have the least amount of information about the library's plans, but that is based off the town structure, right? The library board controls the library requests.
Mm-hmm.
The library budget.
I'm asking, I mean, it's small monies in comparison to whatever, I mean, in the overall budget. I'm thinking though that the basement flooring replacement would only be done after the foundation has been completed. So I want to know whether or not these two things fit in the same fiscal year.
And my recommendation would be to, you had Tom come to a meeting a couple of years ago to talk about library capital. I think inviting someone from the library to the next meeting to understand that would be a good idea, because they.
I think a simple question to him would be fine, and he can just answer it. I don't think he needs to come to the meeting here.
Sure. I just miss all you guys. I want to put you all in the same room or virtual room.
All right, so maybe we take this information and chew on it for a couple of weeks, and then come back in 2 weeks and start to hammer out the plan.
Yep.
I told David the end of January. It's a little later than we normally do it, but that's you can blame it on me. The end of January for this plan still gives plenty of time. The budget won't be presented till the end of March, so still good as long as we get it done by the end of January.
All right, so if we want to, 2 weeks would be Monday, January 3rd. If you guys want to meet, same thing, 7 o'clock that Monday night. Is that all right with everyone?
1 second. Need to look at the calendar here.
Yeah, I didn't bring my phone down. I'll tentatively say yes.
Okay.
Give me a moment here.
And Katie, if you could maybe talk to the folks on the select board and figure out what's a good night for maybe us to kind of convene together in January sometime, that'd be great. And we can start getting the process of a public safety building going.
Our first meeting is January 10th. Would you like me to talk to everyone to get you on that agenda?
Sure.
Okay. January 10th, to my knowledge, is our first meeting.
Are you guys doing virtual or in person?
No, we're in person.
Okay.
Is that a problem? Or?
No, just to,
no.
Well, for me it is. I'm just letting you guys know that I'm still in California. I will probably be in the early January timeframe. So as a result of that, if that can be converted into virtual, that'd be great. Otherwise, I will not be able to attend. Same thing with the upcoming meeting on January the 3rd.
Yeah, well, the 3rd, I would say that I'm okay with this committee meeting virtual as long as you guys are all right with it.
That's fine. I'm just saying that the planning board has been meeting virtually, and it's a hybrid. So, Katie, if they can do a hybrid, that'd be great.
We've tried it a couple times, and it's been like some super epic fails. So we can try it again, though.
All right. I know it's worked okay with both Bill and I joining virtually on the planning board, so I know it works.
Oh, I know it can work. It's just so people with technical difficulties. So I'm not in control. So
no, I understand.
I will do my best.
Thank you,
Katie. That makes me so sad. I tried so hard to increase the technology.
Yeah, trust me. It's some fun stuff. Let me tell you.
All right, so we'll meet our committee meet at 7 on January 3rd virtually, and then we'll plan on whoever can make it, and we'll try to get Francois in there virtually on the 10th with the select board.
We'll see what Omicron has to say about it.
That's true. We may be meeting virtually after Christmas anyway, for everybody. So, all right, well, anything else? Otherwise, we'll take a motion to adjourn.
No, I'd like to make a motion that might continue on as the chairman.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we didn't reorganize. I think we need to make sure that that gets done. So
Yeah,
this is a good time. And I would second that motion.
Okay, I was going to say I'm happy to yield to anybody else, but it sounds like.
You want to take a vote?
All right, all in favor?
Okay, Francois.
Yes.
Okay, we're there.
All right.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. That's called voluntolding, right? Isn't that the?
That's right. Volunteering with a gun at your head.
All right, so motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, submitted by Francois Steiger.
All right.
Second, Murray.
Murray at 7:58. So we'll take a vote. Bill?
Murray, aye.
Yep.
Francois, aye.
Michael, aye.
Thanks, everyone.